Yesterday, we heard news of some radio stations that were shut down for various infractions. Not too long after we heard of a presidential pardon. It was quite interesting, Sky, to discover the number of radio stations that were that had been shut down yesterday as a result of various infractions. But what were some of the offenses they were accused of, for which the NCA earlier announced their shutdown? Do you want to put that off?
You mean
yes,
okay? So the NCA issued a statement yesterday.
Yeah.
Which statement basically announced the shutdown of or the regulatory action affected well over 60 radio stations and establishments that come within the scope of the NCA's authority. And it was on the basis that they had not complied with a number of regulatory arrangements that ought to have been complied with.
Right.
I want to give you some of the details of the statement as issued by the NCA. So, for instance, according to the NCA statement that was issued, the NCA said that 7 FM stations that have paid provisional authorization fees but have final authorization yet to be issued and have not fulfilled the requirements of Regulation 54 of the Electronic Communications Regulations of 2011, LI 1991. Now, a total of approximately 62 stations have been affected. Now, these stations currently do not hold valid broadcasting authorizations or do not have a certificate of compliance to commence operations, and may only resume operations once all regulatory infractions have been addressed and rectified. Now, while the NCA acknowledges the vital role radio stations play in national development, it is imperative that all authorization holders strictly adhere to the regulatory requirements and conditions of their authorizations. Now, consequently, failure to comply with the directive shall constitute an affront to the prescribed conditions for FM broadcasting, with grave consequences for their authorizations. We wish to assure the general public that the NCA remains dedicated to maintaining order in the broadcasting sector. We urge all authorization holders to fully comply with the regulatory requirements to help promote an orderly industry. So this is, I'm just giving you excerpts of the statement that's issued by the National Communications Authority.
Yeah, but not long after that, we heard that the president had granted clemency for the 64 radio stations that were shut down by the NCA.
Exactly.
The Minister for Communications.
Yeah, it was a test statement issued by the minister responsible
for government communication.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, he says President John Dramani Mahama has directed the Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation to liaise with the National Communications Authority to immediately restore the broadcast of the 64 radio stations affected by the regulator's action. The President believes that regulatory compliance must take into account the need to uphold and enhance media freedom, and that requiring radio stations to shut down while awaiting the regularization of the authorization could limit the space for expressing such freedoms. The President has asked the Minister to work with the NCA on a reasonable time frame within which the affected stations should regularize their authorization, to which then the Minister for the sector, Samuel George, announced a 30-day grace period for the errant media houses to go and rectify their books, do the right thing, or risk another shutdown. This has been applauded widely by many. That this is good. Like, you give them some grace period despite they committing some falling short of the regulatory standards and all. Now, we want our institutions to work and function and do their role. So there must be institutional, we always talk about strengthening institutions and all. But then there is room for presidential clemency, isn't there? So that while the institutions are seen to be working, checking their, the institutions that fall under their remits, so that if you are sanctioning bodies for failing to go by the standards as per the law, if the president comes to say, okay, I am a father for all, I want to grant them some clemency, some grace period, should that be seen as, interference in institutional oversight? Or it is again the prerogative of the president to grant institutions some what do you call it? Breathing space.
It's a very difficult conversation for me for a number of reasons. First of all, we all work in this space, and when a regulator moves into the space and decides to exert his authority and to discipline errant radio stations, you call for enforcement of the law, and yet you say, oh, do it with a human face. That's why when it happened under the previous administration, we were up in arms and said, oh, it was excessive. But then again, the question would have been whether they acted within the remit of the law. Of course, when they went to the tribunal upheld some of the punishments, and then others were vacated. That is to say that the NCA, under those conditions, acted partly within the law and partly outside the law. Those who were affected subsequently regularized their things. Some could not do it. Now, the government at that time was attacked for being, heavy-handed in dealing with the matter, and I believe people are entitled to express those views. But the question is whether the NCA is vested with the authority under a number of provisions to do what it does, and whether what it does is in conformity with the requirements of the law. If you look at it strictly speaking, the NCA is under legal obligation to exact some of these punishments. Where they are excessive, the tribunal will come in and moderate that. Of course, those affected can always go into negotiations with the NCA to have their issues dealt with. But I think the thrust of your question is whether presidential authority extends into the space to want to, if you like, modify or moderate whatever regulatory decision is taken by, a regulator like the NCA. The precedent under the Constitution, when you're dealing with matters having to do with conviction from court, does have the authority, after conviction, to exert or introduce clemency. So the presidential prerogative to pardon people who are on conviction and blah, blah, blah. So then all kinds of remittance of sentence, all kinds of things can happen when the president acts in that way. But I am yet to see under the NCA Act where the president is closed with the authority to intervene in a matter like this. While I would applaud the thinking behind it, I think the danger there is executive overreach, where a regulator takes a decision and then the president intervenes and says, this decision might stifle Article 162 of the Constitution, and therefore, Minister, I'm directing you to go and with immediate effect. Look, with the greatest respect, I don't think that this decision just came out of the blue. No serious government will sit down, or president will sit down and see on radio stations or maybe on websites that a number of radio stations have been shut down, and then the president intervenes. This matter would have been discussed at the highest possible level of government, that these are the matters in play. These are the steps we intend to take. Of course, he would have received some briefing. The question is, if there was some presidential intervention needed, why could it not have been done? It could have been
done there without announcing the shutdown.
You see, the danger here is a certain communication that, the president, is a father for all, has seen what's
malleable.
No, you see, and it sent the wrong signal. I am not saying that the president cannot comment on a matter he finds objectionable to media freedom. He can express those views.
But he asked the minister to work with the NCA.
He directed.
He directed the
read
minister.
The paragraph.
So the president has asked the minister to work with the NCA on a reasonable time frame.
No.
Okay, the very first
one.
paragraph.
Yes.
Okay, so President John Dramani Mahama has directed the Minister for Communications, Digital Technology and Innovation to liaise with the NCA to immediately restore the broadcast of 64 radio stations affected by the regulation.
So you see the characterization.
But at the last line also.
Hold on.
No, I want to just introduce that. So it's at the last line, it says the president has asked the minister to work with the NCA on a reasonable time frame within which the affected stations should regularize their, authorization.
So the opening paragraph says what? Directed.
Yes.
The minister.
Yes.
With immediate effect. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that when an institution established by Parliament takes a regulatory decision within its legal scope, it sends the wrong signal where the president intervenes and says with immediate effect that decision should be varied. It is just like you might think that these are oranges and apples. Maybe Parliament takes a decision.
Pascal, basically, you don't disagree with the spirit of the intervention.
No, I don't disagree with it.
It's the if you like the expression of authority that you are, if you like, investigating. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's and I'm sure that if they read it over and over, the point you are making will also become clear to them that the tone of the president, the letter in the second paragraph is more, if you like, conciliatory. And if you are in the business, I was yesterday on several platforms we were discussing. I'm saying that look, unless for the affected companies, unless it was an oversight, okay, and in some cases it will be an oversight. But normally, NCA, and I say normally, NCA will send you reminders about some of these things. Okay, and I've had the chance to even go after the NCA themselves because sometimes they won't tell you and then they surprise you. But the surprise is not in the form of shutdown. So you are given a short time to sort things out. There are some really recalcitrant stations, I must say, and for them, I shudder to think whether the 1 month will be enough for them. But I think, in all fairness, the idea is to try and bring some sanity. But the way we measure the errant nature that they are being punished for, I think it has to be consistent. It has to be consistent. You don't punish one for doing A, and then the other person is getting away with it, and all those things. So there has to be some level of uniformity. And the president is now throwing in his media cap. That hey, the signals are not positive for us. Given my own background, is there something we can do about it?
Sure.
And actually, I was surprised when I heard some judge talk about 1 month. I was hoping that would be like 3 months.
Okay.
But 1 month is very tight, I must say.
Is it?
1 month is very, very tight. But I don't know and again, the problem that the problems that they are being punished for is not the same. It's not the same. So each company and what
they are dealing with.
So, but 1 month is tight. I must say it is tight. But maybe they can sort it out. I mean, you see, they operate within a regulated environment, so it is important. I know that things are difficult. Media houses are struggling all over the place. There is not so much money around to go around. You understand? So it is tight.
Tell me about it.
Exactly. And then also the regime that allows for all manner of licenses to be issued just like that, without any proper audit of the background of the people who want it. Some people, it's just seasonal. Politicians, maybe they're in office today, so there's some money to deal with, operational costs and all of that. Once they get out of office, challenges come in. These are some of the realities, and it calls for a re-auditing of the space so as to ensure that we put in place measures that will correct some of these things. Because we should treat the space as a business environment, first of all, before anything else. But it is a question of whether you know this person, whether you know that person, and then the thing is being shared like candies. I think the time has come to actually look at the space properly and see what we can do to improve it. Of course, the minister said yesterday that they intend to even waive some of the penalties, like the fees that they are supposed to pay. That is a good signal. Mm-hmm. But the concern that I have is that if there are things to do, let it not be one that creates the impression that these media houses that have been granted presidential pardon will now be beholden to the president. Because again, that in itself undermines Article 162 of the Constitution.
Interesting.
So the question will be, okay, so Wontumi FM, would they now
have to
frontal as they
used
have
to
been?
be?
Exactly. Or Asaase Radio. Would they now...
So there's some political gain to be made there.
Exactly. That's why the framers of the Constitution under Article 162 guaranteed media freedom and said certain things which in spirit and in the letter of the Constitution would be a bit, there will be some violence there. Because
that's
of
interesting. So the freedom of speech, you are not paying, you are not sorting the regulator, you are not doing your regulatory, you are not living up to your regulatory obligations, trouble. Then if they give you clemency to, and there can be issues there, ethical issues and all sorts of independence questions and all of that. Yes. That's a very complex mix.
Yeah, because the Constitution under 162 makes it clear that media houses are not to be interfered with in the performance of their duties and all of that. Of course, what happened yesterday has nothing to do with content. It has to do with regulation of the spectrum, which is not an infinite, is that the word to use? Resource, right? So once the resource is limited and it's a technical matter, competent people are given the authority to deal with it. I don't need a license to want to open a newspaper to do anything. All I have to do is to notify the national, what's the board you were on previously?
NMC?
National Media Commission. That the so and so publication is out in related matters. And then they will do their paperwork and all of that. You see, so that one is catered for by the Constitution. But we are talking about a spectrum that is this is not infinite. In which case, the Parliament of Ghana set up a law and says NCA should be responsible for that space. I think we should not send the signals that would worry other regulatory agencies that if I take a decision today, would there be presidential fear that I should reverse it? It may be great in spirit, in terms of how you want to be seen. Vis-a-vis what happened previously, but the signal it sends becomes a bit problematic.
So, I mean, for other regulatory bodies also, if they are reading anything from this body language, could it be that, this could signal, okay, I mean, if we deal with people in accordance with the law, there could be presidential clemency. So let's always get to know beyond the law.
Let's not also sound as if the clemency was to torpedo the law.
Fantastic.
It had the unintended consequence of.
I get that, but again, you see,
that's why I say it was difficult for me to.
I find myself in as an operator, so I can relate. And at times it can be very frustrating. Okay, and for us, we have an officer in charge of NCA issues,
dedicated to NCA
I'm telling
issues.
You,
right?
Otherwise, it will shock you.
True. Before you know that, when you're up on your muscle.
Exactly.
Right.
So, NCA, if they want to come after, you,
they will come after.
It's like policeman standing at Kaswa Junction.
We are there.
So, NCA, we beg.
We greet you.
We greet you. We beg on behalf of the people that extend the 1 month to 3 months so that they can sort themselves out, because it turns out that you are not the only people that they owe.
They should look inside.
Very important.